This podcast is brought to you by the Part of Your Broadway World podcast, and by the Arete Media Podcast Pantheon.
Welcome, everybody, to this episode of the Arete Podcast. I'm joined by Dennis Brennan, and to keep things brief, I'm just going to touch on a couple of career highlights for you. You're a historian, you're an author, you were a former, were you a superintendent, and at what level, or?
No, school board member.
School board member, yes. So you've had a long and storied career, and basically I just want to get started by letting you tell the viewers who is Dennis Brennan.
Yeah, I think you touched upon a few of those things. I started off in journalism while I was still going to law school. Small community newspaper, working for someone as a reporter or editor eventually. Then started my own newspaper, which even was difficult that many years ago. Newspapers were already starting to see their end of their shelf life. Now it's rare if you see them at all. At least back then, you saw people taking the big fold out and reading through the paper. If you go anywhere, I go into a restaurant or on a train, you probably don't see more than one person doing that anymore. Everybody's on their phone. That's where they're getting their news. So newspapers are finding their way to the big scrap heap. But finished law school, and really the only, I had studied journalism in college. That's where I was going to go. But the job offers were, very slim. There was one in Arkansas and one in Iowa. One paid $9,000, one paid $13,000. At the time, I was working part-time in a grocery store making $14,000. So I'm not that dumb. I'm not taking a job that pays less. I'd work full-time. So I went to law school, practiced law, still practice law, but I've touched, somewhat in every area, primarily real estate, some, legislative work. But I have done criminal work, divorce, which is the worst.
So I've heard.
So yeah, anybody that's been in one can tell you it's really bad. But even if you're the attorney, it's bad because both the husband and wife hate each other, but then they also hate each other's attorney, and maybe their own before it's over.
Well, not only that, I gotta think that in that line where like the stink of it to a certain extent rubs off on you just because you're in the general vicinity.
Yeah, it's very difficult too. When you're in divorce and you try to tell people this is what's going to happen, it's very statutory. Anyone can do it out of law school. I mean, it was simple. Like I had no training and I'm taking clients. And you tell them, okay, this is what the statute says. You have children, this is what the child support is. And no matter what you said, they more likely believe some friend, who had told them differently, that you're going to get X from your spouse or he or she is going to have to do this. It's like, no, that's not true. That's not going to happen. And in the end, 99 times out of 100, they get exactly what I told them. But then they were mad at me because they spent money.
Right.
And I was like, so that was something I had to get out of. Did some corporate work, a lot of title insurance. Always had the idea of writing, though. Even with the, I think maybe the journalism background, and I dabbled in it, doing some work online, but overall, I didn't put any real attention into doing something like a book until now, and now I'm, fully integrating myself into writing books. And first one is, published. Second one is being reviewed now by an editor, and we'll see where that goes.
Sounds good, which we'll touch on your book right now. So your book, which is called DC Swamp, DC Swamp Strikes Back. Apparently it draws a lot of parallels between Aaron Burr and Donald Trump. And without spoiling the book for everybody, can you connect some of those dots? Because the idea of that is just absolutely fascinating to me.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, what they know of Aaron Burr isn't much. I mean, because we're living in the times of Donald Trump, we all seem to know a lot about him right now, or we think we do. And he's out there, he's always telling us more about himself. So that story keeps being built. But Aaron Burr, what do we remember from school? We remember that there was a duel with Alexander Hamilton. Alexander Hamilton died, right? Most of us probably don't remember what they called the Burr conspiracy, which is when they
I do,
him.
but I'm a bit
You
of
do.
a nerd. I have a question about the Burr conspiracy, actually.
Okay, and that's that was probably the other big news about Aaron Burr, right? You had the duel, everybody knows.
Yeah.
The Burr conspiracy, a lot of us probably forgot. You're probably one in a million that remembers
Well,
some of it.
I would venture to guess that most people have never heard of it, which is kind of, I touch on this. We have another podcast on our network that deals with Broadway and Disney, and we put the musical Hamilton on trial because I'll just be honest, I don't think it was very good.
Either
but
do I.
But I pointed out, I said, listen, like it goes into the whole thing about an artist doesn't have to do anything, but when you're telling a story about historical figures, I think to a point you have a bit of a responsibility insofar as a lot of people are going to watch this and assume that everything you're saying happened. And that's the same case as things you omit. And it's like, you're not going to talk at all about the Burr conspiracy here. And you're going to paint Aaron Burr as this guy who's basically just living on the coattails of Alexander Hamilton and having basically just a giant amount of resentment, which, I mean, to be fair, to a point, he probably wasn't thrilled with Hamilton as an individual, but it expresses in his letters that the duel was one of his largest regrets.
Right. And I think, you've hit on a few points there. I too did not like the musical Hamilton. I don't understand why everybody that I talk to would love it.
I have a theory. I have a theory of it's basically like a cross between cultural. Oh gosh, why am I blanking on that word? Basically, it's like cultural contamination. Basically, certain things pop up in the zeitgeist, and basically you're told you're supposed to love this thing, and most people then take it upon. Oh, it's like they go see the thing and they're like, they either just go in assuming they're going to love it and then don't really look for critiques or anything like that, and they basically jump on the bandwagon, or they watch something, listen to something, eat something, whatever it may be, and they say, well, I didn't really care for this, but everybody says it's great, so I must be wrong. And then they just kind of go with it.
Yeah, I think that's true. It's like an old form of peer pressure where you're being told it's good, and you're like, well, maybe I just don't know what I'm talking about. I think, you start to question yourself. And I would say I'm not the biggest expert on musicals, so maybe I'm wrong there on, some of the music.
But you can, everybody can do basically what I did, where it's like, okay, to be fair, maybe I'm missing something, but I feel like I know a little bit more about Alexander Hamilton than the average just rank and file American out there, because I, like to read, history nerd, blah, 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 blah. I can't find a single person, or I haven't yet found a single person who can explain to me why Hamilton is so great. I'm not dogging on the performances. Some of the performances are absolutely great. Lin-Manuel Miranda's, not so much. But nobody can point to the thing and say this is what makes Hamilton amazing, other than something like the casting, which I found as gimmicky and ironic. But we don't have to go into that. But nobody could give me a legitimate reason that resonated with me as to why Hamilton was an incredible piece of art that was, unmissable. So
yeah, well, sometimes I think it's the critics with anything. Why does anything blow up and become popular? You'll even see it, on TV shows or, musical people. And I heard so many people tell me with the Super Bowl, oh, Bad Bunny is, you're going to love it. And I'm thinking, I never saw Bad Bunny do anything. I don't know. Couldn't name a song. And, after watching it, I still couldn't name anything. And, so there's different tastes,
For
but,
sure, for sure.
But critics jump out there and say, whatever, the musical's good, or, and sometimes that's out of New York. And, then the rest of the country's supposed to see, oh, I've got to go see this Hamilton. It's now in Chicago where I'm at, or it's,
Yeah.
wherever, it's in Iowa. And people go with that expectation, like you're saying, well, everybody says it's great. I mean, how many times that's happened with movies too, where
For sure.
you
It
go
happens.
to a movie after it's got all the big reviews and people have talked about it. They've been on talk shows. You're like, well, I guess I'll go see it. I've tried to get away from that because now if it's something, subject wise that I don't really have an interest in, why would I go?
Yeah.
Because other people think it's good doesn't matter. It's,
Mm-hmm.
but we do it with restaurants. You find out yourself when you go to a restaurant, you say, wow, they were wrong. I waited in line for 45 minutes to eat there. And it's awful.
And I paid how much?
Right. And it turns out, wow, it's no better than what I already was eating. And so I think some of that, yeah, how do you catch that fire though, whenever you're doing something? And Hamilton, to its credit, if it gets any credit, it was able to do that for whatever reason.
Oh no, I'll never take away its spot as a cultural phenomenon. I just make the case that it's undeserved for the most part. I'm not that it's horrible. I've seen way worse shows than Hamilton, but to the degree that, and especially since again you're talking about historical people, and it paints Hamilton as kind of like basically like a flawed saint, but he knew he was flawed, and it's kind of like, I don't know that you can make that case. And Jefferson's character is completely backward. I mean, but that's the whole. But Aaron Burr especially, I was kind of surprised with how he was painted in this, because I thought going in that they were gonna either paint him as the villain of the piece or as sort of a deconstruction of the idea of who Aaron Burr was. And they kind of did that, but they didn't know enough about them, or it comes across as they didn't know enough about him to really accomplish that goal. Because he does kind of come across as somebody who should have been the good guy, but for whatever reason wasn't. And it's kind of weird.
Yeah, well, I think because he's played as the nemesis of Hamilton throughout history, that they couldn't do that with the way they wrote this thing. I think. Yeah. Hard to say. We'd have to get Lin Miranda on. And
I would say, but I think also the fact too, I would have recommended they not do that had I been consulted in any, which I never would have been. But I would have said, well, I don't think enough people know. I don't think enough people know who Aaron Burr even is to really make a go of this mission. So I think you should stick with Hamilton. But how historically accurate do you want to be, and how much do you want it to ruin your show? Because it's going to.
Right. But, and you touched on that with the historical accuracy. We run into that in other cases too. And, whenever they say based on a true story, you'll see it in movies or, it reminds me of Fargo, based on a true story. And then they give you this whole explanation of
a completely fictional account of,
right. That we've made up all of this, but it's a true story. Yeah, it's a true story in that you're telling the story, but that's about it. And so that's always rough. So it anytime you see those, you have to kind of go in with the idea, well, this may not be 100% accurate, but the problem is a lot of viewers, whether they're at Hamilton or something else, are taking it as gospel.
Right. And they're not going to do the research, which again, to a point I understand, but I'm a weird person. Again, I will throw this out there. I'm weird. If I watch a movie or a TV show that's based on historical events, I immediately go and research it, because I'm like, who was real? How real was this? Because I know some of it's, at least, which you have to, for narrative reasons, you have to combine characters or condense events and things like that. And oftentimes, though, the true story's 1,000 times more fascinating, but not as clean.
Right. And I find myself doing the same thing. So, often you see something and you have to ask that question, going on the internet, like, is this true? Or is this, it's the same way we see social media. People post things, even news media that's considered unbiased. You have to look it up and go, wait a minute, I haven't seen this anywhere. I want to know the whole story. They left something out, I think, but maybe not. Most of the time they have. It's like, wait, you've really slanted this story down. And so, yeah, we've all become little investigative journalists or something. We shouldn't have to do that on a movie, but maybe I don't know, maybe I'm one of those people that just can't enjoy it for what it is and go, okay, you said it's based on a true story. In my mind, I know what that really means. Most of this is made up.
Yeah.
And
Well,
leave it at that.
I always use Braveheart as the example. Braveheart is a movie that I absolutely love, but anytime I watch it with somebody, I'm like, that's actually not how it happened. In that battle, there actually was a bridge at that battle, even like, so
That's getting deep.
yeah, is it a great movie? Absolutely. I love that movie. But to be honest, I'd love for them to make a more accurate William Wallace movie to kind of go, it's like, here's the Hollywood one, and here's the one, if you want to know what actually happened, watch this one.
Well, and I think it's the same way when you take even what are considered great movies. You take The Godfather, whether it's 1 and 2, and then you'll have people go, well, it's not. Goodfellas is much more realistic. And it's like, okay, I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm sure there's other movies that are even more realistic, but they're good movies.
Right. Yeah. And there's a balance you strike there. And I give a way more leeway. Like, I give way more leeway to a movie like 300, which is based on a comic book. A lot of people don't know that, but it's extremely faithful to its source material. But its source material is a highly fictionized version of what happened at and leading up to the Battle of Thermopylae.
Well, there you go. And
yeah.
So, so some of it's probably on us.
Yeah, for sure. But the reason I wanted to bring up Aaron Burr, though, is, and then we'll get back to the connections between him and Donald Trump, because the way it was framed in the tidbit of the synopsis I was reading, I was like, instantly I thought, okay, well, if he's making parallels between Aaron Burr and Donald Trump, that tells me that the Burr conspiracy may not be what it's been reported to be.
Mm-hmm.
So is the Burr conspiracy a real thing, or was it overblown and political fodder for his opponents?
Yeah, and that's the crux of it, really. That's like the worst thing that happened. They ruined Aaron Burr with the Burr conspiracy. It's most people, and at least when I was in elementary school, when they talked about Aaron Burr, it's like, well, his career was over after he had the duel and shot and killed Alexander Hamilton. Well, as you dig deeper, no, not really. I mean, the Burr conspiracy is what really did it. That, dueling back then, while technically illegal in most places, was done. I mean, it's strange, but it was, a way that men settled their disputes, unfortunately. But the conspiracy, we've, and it's not only myself, it's been done elsewhere that kind of breaks down what Aaron Burr was charged with. He was charged with treason. This idea that he was going to form his own country, or at the very least, there were different stories, but one was he's going to form his own country in what's now the, southwestern part of the United States, which was under Spanish control. And, at that point, they claim they had documents that proved he had conspired with a gentleman named Wilkinson, who was in the U.S. military, but also worked for Spain. He was on their payroll, which is kind of strange that you could have two sources of income from two different countries. That in itself sounds perhaps a little treasony, but
on the surface. But hey, I mean, what Uncle Sam don't know won't hurt him, right?
I guess. But, they charged Burr based on correspondence between the two men, but it was Wilkinson who was decoding the letters back and forth. Nobody else knew what it said except Burr. And, did Burr plan on doing something? I don't know if there's evidence that he did or didn't. I leave it. There's others that have written, looking at the same documents, that Burr's completely innocent. That this was all Wilkinson making up what the letters said. In truth, we don't know. Wilkinson, told different stories, and that certainly leads you to think perhaps Burr was framed. And it took a while for Jefferson to get on board. Jefferson was the president at the time.
Yeah.
And at first, when he was told, hey, Burr is a traitor, this is what he's doing, he was like, no way. Because, and I detail in the book, Burr really, more than anyone, was responsible for Jefferson winning the presidency. And, people kind of think of like, well, that's a no-brainer. Thomas Jefferson, anybody could get him elected. Wouldn't you like to be the political consultant who says, I've got Jefferson, who do you have? I was like, that's a pretty good candidate, but it was really Burr, maneuvering politically in New York to get the votes, the electoral votes for him. So he was reticent to say Burr was a traitor in any way, but all of Jefferson's people, much like, the current day deep state, you had people like Madison, Monroe, a lot of the Virginia contingent who really did not like Aaron Burr and were out to get him. They were out to prevent him from being president in the future. So the conspiracy, I think, is thrown into question. It's something we never really questioned in school. You were just told that was what happened, and Burr was this bad actor. The only thing I could say to the other side of it that makes you think at times either Burr's a comedian or he was almost admitting it. Because all the time after he had won his cases for treason, he was found not guilty. He goes over to Europe. He doesn't have a great life after all of this. He's politically just ruined. But, he was asked originally, did you have anything to do with it? And he's like, no way. There's, he would rather, give up his own life than to commit treason against the U.S. But, after the Spanish-American War, took place, he made kind of a smart aleck comment that like he was just, 10 years ahead of time when the U.S. And it's like, wait a minute, what are you saying? Did you do it or did you not do it? So,
well, and one could make the argument that maybe he was somewhere in the middle. Maybe he saw an opportunity. It's like, hey, we can land grab, because I don't know the timeline between that and the Louisiana Purchase happening. But I mean, it seemed pretty clear that at least most of the United States government was kind of primed to grab some more land. So maybe he saw an opportunity through Wilkinson to get some more territory, and it just, the idea of it got spun. Because the narrative I'd always heard was that Burr was trying to grab land and power and make himself King Aaron Burr of, and I forget what he was going to call the place allegedly, but that was the narrative I'd always heard.
Right, and that's one of them, and that's one that Wilkinson told. But Wilkinson also told a different narrative that kind of goes closer to your first thought there. That when they first talked about it, they would have their army. The idea was Burr was going to travel down the river, meet up with Wilkinson, and they would go and fight. And once the fight started, they were convinced that the United States would jump in and back them, that they were doing this for the country. Now, you can't start wars on behalf of your own country, so that's not a great explanation, but it certainly makes Burr look better than he wanted to be king.
Right.
Or dictator, or whatever you might want to say. I think, Burr denied that any of that was true. So, we're left with Burr saying none of it's true. We have Wilkinson telling two different stories, and the government being unable to prove treason. So that's where it ends up. Now, despite all that, he's ruined. Whether you could win in court and lose your reputation, which I think he did. And unfortunately, that's the case.
Hi, this is Bill Farmer, the voice of Goofy and other characters. You got to watch the Part of Your Broadway World podcast right here. It's going to be fun.
Yep. So with that being said, everyone who's listening to this should be starting to see, if you didn't already, some of the parallels between Burr and Trump, and maybe you're thinking of other historical figures, but there were a lot of court cases, and I assume Burr was involved in more scandal than just that.
Well, yeah, Burr, obviously he was tried for his duel with Hamilton, but that was something, he was acquitted on that, which is kind of strange, but he was. That's one that we know they both, it's like mutual combat, I guess.
Yeah.
So acquitted. Um, with treason, he was tried twice. And I think when you see, at least what I saw when I started reading about Aaron Burr, over the last couple of years, I saw the parallels with Trump on how the government was dead set on getting Burr. Like they were always after him, and it didn't matter, and much like Trump, they filed several cases against Trump. With Burr, they filed one in Kentucky for treason. It didn't matter that wasn't the right jurisdiction. They had a friendly prosecutor that was related to Madison. And, they thought, which we see those kind of parallels with some of Trump's cases.
Yeah.
And then they take the guy and, basically grab him and travel across the country, which back then it's not putting him on a nice fighter jet and sending him home. You're traveling by horseback and buggy and, so it's a long ride. And they're going to try him again for treason, which they did.
Isn't that a violation of the Fifth Amendment?
Well, I think there were a lot of things violated back then that they didn't seem to hear.
That's true. And I guess you could always say, no, it was a state charge, which they also did with Trump. Yeah,
but like in the first trial, the reason they were able to get around it is the first one, the judge threw it out. So he never got a guilty or not guilty. It was like, you're not in the right courtroom. So I'm throwing this out. I'm dismissing it on jurisdictional grounds. So that they thought, well, we're going to do it on the right grounds. We're going to bring him back. And the other fascinating thing with Burr is, and it goes to Jefferson, it makes you think less of Jefferson, actually. Jefferson was directing the whole thing from the White House. Once he got on board, he got on board full force, both boots in. It's we're going to bring this guy down, which is very strange since, like I said, a lot of credit for Jefferson's win for president was Burr. If it wasn't for Burr getting New York, and it wasn't just that he came from New York, he went to New York, he worked the General Assembly there to put the right people in that would vote that way, since each state's legislature decided the electoral votes at that time, which I don't think is a great system, but we changed that to give the voters more say.
Well, and I do always find it funny that people complain about how the government works now. It's like, oh, go back. Like, go back. Yeah. You think it's unfair now. Oof. Like,
right. And some of those rules have been changed.
For sure.
Burr was in the middle of a couple of those. Like the first time him and Jefferson ran, they ran against John Adams, and they lost that one. Which that was a heck of a choice, Jefferson and Adams. I always find it funny when people nowadays, no matter who's running, they'll say, we can't come up with anything better than these two people. And I think I've said it myself, like, oh my God, these are out of all the people we have, there you had Jefferson and Adams. And at least now, as we look back, we go, wow, that's pretty good. How do you come up with candidates like that anymore? But, the first time, to an extent, Burr was kind of blamed by some of Jefferson's people, not by Jefferson, but instead of just, moping about or quitting politics, Burr went back and did the hard work to change, the law. Well, not the law, but the votes. Mm-hmm. And, the law eventually changed in the second election because Jefferson and Burr running together as a team tied. Burr did such a great job. He brought in so many votes for Jefferson and himself. They were tied. And back then, the top two vote getters, so that's why we had Jefferson as the vice president for Adams, because they were the top two vote getters. In the second election, when Jefferson won, him and Burr were the top two, and it went to Congress to take a vote. I think, that was another controversy, but they've changed both of those things. We don't have that anymore. Thank God. Could you imagine, you're running for vice president, now you're the president, and the guy that was running with you is,
well, I'm not going to lie. I'm a fan of governmental gridlock, so I think that system would be interesting. Having not lived through it, I'm sure living through it, it was much more frustrating than I'm imagining, but I don't know.
Yeah. And I don't know if the voters, like if you vote, you usually vote for the president. I mean,
Typically, yeah. Yeah.
It's nice to have a good vice presidential candidate, but there's been
It's
so many that
it's a
the vice
consider
president's off.
yeah. For me, it's always a consideration because it's like, okay, if something happens to the president, which historically speaking is rare, but I mean, the possibility is always there, especially if your candidate is older.
Hmm.
Who's going to fill that seat should something happen to the president? But you're right. Most people are voting for the president, and the vice president is kind of the vice president's almost like okay, what demographic can we get to latch onto us by this choice anymore?
Right. Yeah. And I think, some of the famous ones when John Kennedy ran, he took Lyndon Johnson, who he really disliked, and who really disliked him. But hey, if you can bring in the South, especially Texas, we can win this thing. And what it comes down to is, I want to win. I don't want to lose. And had he not had Johnson, Kennedy doesn't win that. I mean, I guess if he doesn't have Chicago with votes, he doesn't win that either. But
He had other help, is what you're saying.
yeah, so I'm told.
So they say.
Yeah.
So, I mean, but are there, other than trials and whatnot, are there, because I've heard in some of your other podcasts, you're also talking about how, like, both Trump and Burr had kind of unintentionally made some enemies before they really, really got into politics. And I'm just curious
Yeah.
at what some of these other parallels might be.
Yeah, I think, a lot of it starts, some of it's basic. Like you have Burr, his father started Princeton University. Trump, it's been well chronicled, his father started Trump. I mean,
Right.
he was also a developer on a different scale, but a developer. So each of them, perhaps started, on second base, and which is nice. Nobody, while I didn't get that opportunity, I wouldn't mind starting at second base.
Right. Yeah. You're at least, and I mean, to be fair, it's like you can't really blame them for where they start. You can, I guess you can blame them on what they do with that, but that's a separate
Right.
issue. But that's interesting that they both kind of started out with a leg up, so to speak.
Right. And they both took advantage of that. Now, both are from New York. They both were naive in that, Trump had no political experience except donating to people, usually of the other party,
Right.
almost exclusively to the other party. So kind of a surprise there. Burr was obscure too. He had spent 2 years in the legislature, and he caught the eye of some people in Jefferson's party who thought, hey, this guy can really speak. He's arguing here, and he's making a lot of sense. He could help us. But, so Jefferson really had nothing to do with picking Aaron Burr the first time. He was like, okay, whoever, just put him on the ticket. And, if you believe what's said in Jefferson's letters and so forth, which, that's how he depicts it. In the second run, he wanted, he wanted Aaron Burr because of the work Burr did. And he made sure he was on the ticket. And then by the third race for Jefferson, he doesn't want Aaron Burr and dumps him. So, all over the board, kind of, which I found a little disloyal. If a guy got you elected.
Well, I mean, yeah, but it's funny because the more you learn about the founding fathers, not all of them, but in that earlier period, I mean, people think that it's politically charged now. It's like, ooh.
Right.
I mean, not for nothing. The second president of the United States violates the First Amendment by helping pass a law saying that it's a crime to say bad things about the president, among other things.
Which is, Trump could use that now. You can't say anything bad about me. but yeah, it's awful when you think about that, because you think of the founding fathers as without sin, but they were just as bad. It's just, we hold them in such high esteem, and because they did such a good job in forming the country.
Well,
So,
I mean, not for nothing. 250 some odd years later, I mean, the institutions largely are still standing
yeah,
against a couple of many wars, including 2 world wars, a couple of political, worse than a political scandal, a couple of insurrections, the White House being on fire, and it's still there.
It is amazing, and that's the credit they deserve for putting something together that stood the test of time. And while we get aggravated, some of those things built into the system, perhaps not you as much because you want
But
stagnation, right?
people, I mean, yeah, well, I wouldn't say stagnation. I just like the gridlock because to me it seems like if something's a really good idea, it will probably have broad appeal.
You would hope.
You would hope, yeah, knock on wood. But then again, I mean,
Although,
we still don't have privatized Social Security, so
well, and that's one idea, but even the what is it, the Save Act? Is it the
uh-huh.
Save Act that has like 80, 85? Is that the one that has 85%? One of them has
In polling,
85%
yeah,
support. Yeah, and it's like
something like that, yeah.
the people think it's a good idea, but we can't get both parties to think it's a good idea.
Well, and to be fair, the people don't know what the bill says in its entirety, which I also think is kind of an
Yeah.
undue or an unfair critique that a lot of politicians deal with. It's like, well, why'd you vote against this? It's like because there was a provision in there that nobody would have liked, and you know,
Right. Well, and that's you prefer that every issue is just straight up and
sure,
down. It's kind of like, what am I having for dinner? Well, I'll choose this. Wait a minute, we threw something else in there with it. I know you wanted the steak, but now we're also making you eat grits with your steak. Well, I
yeah,
didn't want grits. You have no choice.
yep. And
And
the law mandates that you have to eat the grits; you can't set them to the side.
right. Yeah. So I do think some of those bills are very complicated, and it makes it difficult for, some people vote for things that they wouldn't have normally, and obviously the public, we support things because we only hear part of it. Um, or we don't, there's now a movement about, well, they're calling it amnesty, but at the same time, I think it's Representative Luna out of Florida is saying it's not amnesty, it's a path to citizenship that she's trying to put forward. And I guess there's about 10 Republicans that are with her on it. And it's like, but it would create amnesty. It's just you're not calling it that. And I think sometimes people, they go, yeah, I like the idea that there's a path, but I don't like the idea that you're not deporting people any longer. It would stop deportations. It's like, well, this bill
Oh yeah,
seems
it all depends on it depends on the mechanism and what the end result will be. I mean, that's with anything for sure. But yeah, I mean, optically it depends on how you spin it, I guess.
right. And sometimes it becomes kind of complicated because you have 4 or 5 provisions in there rather than, if you wanted to do amnesty, okay, then put a bill in that says that. But
Right.
it balanced with 5 other things. You're like, well, I like that one part, but not the 4 other ones. So it's difficult.
Yep. And it was going on back then too, everybody. A lot of the problems that are quote unquote new problems are going back to the very beginning and then some.
Right. And I think, you had the same, battles with parties. Everybody likes to now talk about how George Washington said in his farewell address to not have political parties, which is now we hold that up and go, what a great idea. Except, would it be? I mean, who wants one party? That doesn't sound like a good idea either. What's he talking about? And Jefferson and Adams were on different sides politically. They had different ideas.
Well, and
So,
coalition building, I mean, it seems to me is kind of just like a natural step in a democratic process. Like, I mean, you put 100 people in a room, eventually they're going to congregate into groups of things that they have in common, whether they be interests, background, anything. It's going to happen naturally. So it was kind of I get what Washington was saying, but at the same time, to your point, it's kind of like, yeah, but this was sort of an inevitability. I mean, it was already happening.
right. Yeah. And I do think, yeah, you used to have much more of that coalition building in the past. And that was great. But, the problem is now I think the parties are so split, and the way of winning in your party in the primary for the Democrats, it's the far left. For the Republicans, I'd say now it's the MAGA Trump. Used to be the hard right, very conservative. I'm not sure those are the same anymore with Trump in
Well,
there.
no, we're seeing a split that I'm kind of proud because I kind of sort of saw it coming. You're seeing a split in the Republican Party now, and I think honestly, I think once Trump is out, I think you're going to see an even further divide because Trump's not there to kind of hold the center anymore, or Trump won't be
Yeah.
there to kind of hold the center anymore between the what I would say even 2 years ago was sort of the more to the masses the more unpalatable far right, the more
Mhm.
extreme elements of that, and then your sort of rank and file Republicans who have sort of molded into that MAGA movement, and they're starting to
Mhm.
split because Trump has found that politics are more complicated than he initially thought.
Yeah. Well, we all find that out eventually. I
Yeah, but
think.
but the friend but the more extreme right is, now they're giving Trump grief for, and whether you agree with it or not, I mean, this happened, Trump sort of cozying up more to Israel and a myriad of other things, being the no new wars president. And now there's military action in Iran and Venezuela, joking
Yeah.
about, well, I'm not joking, but saying that, your military force isn't off the table to take Greenland and Canada is going to be the 51st state, which I'm glad that was a joke because if the Republicans never wanted to win again, making Canada a state would be a fantastic way to do so, at least for 50 some odd years.
Right. No, I agree with that. That wouldn't have been a great idea. And yeah, some of those ideas he throws out are new to politics in a way because at least the Republican Party, you just didn't have that.
No.
And I'd say even to the Democratic, he's just someone on his own. There's
To a
there's
point,
nobody like
yeah, yeah. Well, it's funny because people forget this, but if you go back to 2015, 2016, Donald Trump was a joke.
yeah.
Even mainstream Republicans were like, "This guy, like, come on." And I mean, I was like, you're not. You should really be paying attention to the people on the street and how they're taking
Yeah.
him
Well, and
because
it's
he's
funny.
resonating.
That's what it is. He found a way to get to those people who were upset, maybe with both sides, but certainly within the Republican Party.
Hmm.
That and maybe it was too much Bush. I don't know. We had a lot of the Bush family, and all of a sudden Jeb, who you thought would be the candidate when that started, was out of the running pretty quickly, and almost a joke with Trump just berating him on stage and calling him low energy Jeb, and it's like, I don't know if that was the first name calling he did, but it is. He's a phenomenon. It'll be interesting going forward what happens. You have on paper you would think the Republicans have a lot of people that could win an election, but they don't have what Trump has. And I'm not even sure how you categorize what Trump has.
I've
He
heard.
drives people crazy, but he also engages them to get out and vote and to be with them for.
Well, I've said ironically, Trump may end up being one of the more unifying presidents of the modern age. Not in the way he wanted to, but because now there's people on both sides of the aisle that are really, really upset with Donald Trump, and it's weird because the political horseshoe theory has now become manifest in a way because you have elements of the far right and the far left saying the exact same things, but for completely different reasons, and it's
Yeah.
fascinating to watch.
Well, and I think one of the things, the war stuff is difficult. Although, when you sit there and go, okay, it's not a normal war either.
No.
It's neither was Venezuela. I would even call Venezuela a war.
No. Just like a military / more of an international police action, but use of the military. So, but
Yeah, and got away with it, and
yeah.
and now you don't hear much about that, which is kind of a change.
Well,
to
to
how
be fair,
things-
I think they're still waiting for Maduro's trial to start.
Yeah, he made a few motions to
Yeah.
try to, it didn't work, and it's always interesting because you put the vice president in charge in Venezuela, you have to think she was in on it. Like, how did?
For sure. That's kind of why it's a mild criticism, but I said this about the Trump administration at the time. I was like, but what's phase two here? Because you can't
Yeah,
be so naive as to think that like Maduro was the only thing holding that government together. Not even they all have their hand in the pot. And once
right.
he's gone, they're just going to continue business as usual. Now, I'd say the one mild difference is, well, there's some incentive to play ball with the Trump administration because if you don't, you might be next on a helicopter at 3 o'clock in the morning. But I mean, you're not going to get like a brand new government, and they're certainly not going to agree to free and fair elections. Like that's just not going to happen.
Right. And that's, and I think that's the problem you face in Iran also. It's like,
Hmm.
okay, you've knocked out 50 or whatever it is of their leaders. And okay, now what? Like, we don't even know who's in charge. Is it the head of the parliament who you see on TV? Is it the military? Uh, because you get back and forth, different things are being said or happen. Events like you just saw again, the Strait of Hormuz was, again closed. It's like, well,
Right.
who did that? I thought you agreed. Well, no, it's the Revolutionary Guard. Well, that's a problem.
Aren't they the military though? I mean, I know that it's not
Yeah,
that cut and dry, but like on the surface you would think, but aren't they the military?
right. And they're the military that's left, I think. I know there's special forces,
Probably, probably.
but
Well,
yeah,
it's
what do you do if let's say you've won? Trump says, well, we got rid of the Navy, we got rid of the, okay, if you got rid of the Navy, who's shooting at these
well, we've also
boats?
it's that's also happened before. I mean, in
Yeah,
regards to the Iranian Navy, I mean, this is unfortunately this is a road we've been down before.
yeah, and what do you do unless you're willing to take out all the leadership and put people in, and that requires ground troops. And I know a lot of military people said that when this started, and you're like, oh no, he's got another plan. But if he does, what's the plan? Because I don't know how you change anything there. They'll
I
agree to things and
I
then they
think
disagree.
I think they were maybe hoping that the people would rise up. I think maybe that's what they were hoping for, but again, it's just not that simple. Like there's certainly a I would say a fairly significant population of just the average Iranian people that would be in favor of a new government, but how many of them are willing to, take that risk because it's not as easy as opening the door and saying you're out. Like there's fighting that's going to have to be done.
Well, right. And what weapons do they have to fight the Revolutionary Guard?
Exactly. And
So,
it's interesting that we went to Iran organically because one of the questions I have is that historical narratives need to be challenged because I recently, like within the last week, another narrative that I had heard all my life growing up was that the United States through the CIA had deposed a democratically elected leader in Iran and installed the Shah. And it turns out that's not even close to being accurate. The Shah was already in power,
yeah.
and you had a
But you're
prime
right.
minister who illegally dissolved the Iranian parliament and was refusing after the Shah had constitutional authority to dismiss a prime minister. He was appointed and dismissed, but he said, "No, I'm not leaving." And it's like, no, but the narrative that in recent history, the narrative of the left has been, well, yeah, but the only reason Iran is where it is because we went in and, deposed a democratic government and installed a king. And it's like, but that's not what happened.
Right. But that's what we've been told. You're absolutely right. And it's kind of interesting, when this first broke out, it was the son of the Shah who was on TV talking, as if he was going back. And I'm thinking, does that work?
Oh, I saw him and I said, I don't think that's a good idea.
Right. Yeah.
I
I'm
don't
thinking,
know that I'd be that brave if I were you, but I mean,
yeah, you better go back with like an army. This isn't,
don't think the
you know,
CIA is going to, although maybe the CIA will back him this time. I don't know, but that seemed brave.
yeah. I mean, if you could go back with an army, I guess you could somehow get people to rise up
Yeah,
and come out with
in
it.
another 50 years, though, there would be another religious revolution because absolute power corrupts absolutely. And when you're told, hey, you're the king of a country and you can do whatever you want, basically, I mean,
Right.
just most people are going to.
I think and that is part of the problem. When he was on television, he was talking about, helping, but he never said he wanted to be the Shah
This is
or
true.
the king. And I thought, well, yeah, if you stick to that, maybe, but
Yeah.
are you going to risk your life?
If you say you're going to run for the office of the president, that's one thing. But
Right.
I mean, you really have to stick to that. And frankly, this sounds bad, but it's true. I mean, you're talking about another region of the world that is just not used to having, they're not used to having a democratic government.
No, and
And
that's
that
been the
takes
theory
time.
for a while. A lot of people say you just can't bring democracy to that area because they've never done that. And, like I guess, we've had our former government, as you mentioned, the 250 years, that's all we've known.
Right.
People who have come from other countries, sure, they may have known some other system, but, and maybe that's why they left that system. But for those of us that are born here that, and now we're 250 years in, that's all we've known. We can't say, boy, having a monarchy would be great. And if we did say
Well,
it,
some people say that.
yeah, but we'd say it like, if I could be king.
Well, no,
then it's great.
some people would. I think an alarming not enough to make it happen politically, but I think there are an alarming number of people that would be okay with King Donald Trump.
Wow. I don't. That's an interesting point because it's often said
Not enough to make it happen, but I think it's the numbers bigger than a lot of people would be comfortable with.
You think this goes beyond like the Trump family and their
yeah
and their
no
friends?
well, because here's the thing that Trump did, and on the one hand it was really, really good. I have personal anecdotes, but there's also data. He made a lot of people in 2016. He made a lot of people that were not political before political, and the double-edged sword of that is, okay, great, they went out and voted and some of them learned some stuff, but the research stopped there, the learning stopped there. So there's a lot of people that I believe, and I think the data shows this, again, not a significant enough number to make anything really happen, but I think there's a large number of people that are just kind of on the Trump train, and whatever Trump says or does is a-okay by them. And if he wanted to put a crown on his head, I think they'd be totally okay with it, because you'd hear arguments of like, well, yeah, the government's gridlocked and, nothing gets done anyway. So it would be a lot more expedient. And I mean, I guess to a point that's true, but what are the expedient things that are going to be done?
Well, and part of the problem, I mean, I'd be against that, but
I would
understand.
too, but not because it's Trump. I'd be against that because I don't want a king, period.
Right. Well, I'd say unless it's me.
Right. That's right. Like, I can be trusted, but what happens after me? That's the age-old problem of a monarchy, right? Because the first
Yeah.
king's always great, right? The first king is always
Right.
fantastic, and the second one might be okay, but by the time you get to the third or fourth, it's just a shit show.
Right, especially when you're passing it family.
Yeah, when it's hereditary. I mean, look no further than the Habsburgs.
Right. So it happens where people, may get a good first king, but then it goes downhill. I think we're ingrained in this system, although I think I tend to agree with you. There are people that would accept the king because, and maybe Trump isn't the first one where that would happen. Some of these supporters, we've seen it with executive orders. And it's not only at the federal level, at the state level where governors do it too. And everybody just says, okay, what do you mean?
Well,
okay?
no, there would have been at least a handful of people that would have been okay with a King Barack Obama, for example. Like there are people to this day that are still just on that Obama train for whatever reason. It's just like whatever Obama said was gospel, and it cannot be argued against.
Yeah, and every once in a while he comes out and says something as if it's some great proclamation from up above, and you're like, you didn't say anything.
Yeah, right.
But the people that are following him in their minds are like,
it's music to their ears.
Right. It's like, that is so deep. I wish he was still in office. Well, he served 2 terms.
Yeah.
He doesn't get another one.
Yeah.
I mean,
There's a
So
mechanism to change that, but it's very difficult. And if you want to try and make that happen, hats off to you. But I don't think it's going to
I
happen.
no, I think there's other things I'd rather have happen than that. Uh, I think 2 terms, but at the end of the 2 terms, we're pretty much sick of who was ever in there.
Well, I
Um,
personally, after 2 terms, I think the president's sick of it. Because I mean,
yeah,
I don't enjoy it, but it's fascinating if you look at, like I think Obama may have been the more pronounced one just because you could see, because he was so young when he was elected and he served the full 2 terms, is you see his first inauguration and then you see Trump's inauguration. And
hmm
the difference is just so
yeah,
unbelievable. Like you can see it on his face. Like somebody who serves, it's only 8 years, but they age 20 years.
you're right. It's very rare to see a president not age, um, and it's never good. It's not
Never.
like, well, you look better 8 years later.
Yeah.
You know,
No,
it's
I don't know if that's ever happened. In fact, one of my favorite bits Saturday Night Live ever did, it was when it was actually after Obama won. Oh, no, sorry, not Obama. It was when Clinton, it was very, very early. I think it was when W won. It's got Daryl Hannah, who does the best Clinton impression to this day, packing up a suitcase in the Oval Office, and he's literally just like, he wants this job, he can have it.
well, yeah. I mean, it is the toughest job. I think the
Oh,
toughest job in the
it's
world.
not a job I would want.
It's and a lot of times you're going to be stuck with things that happen all over the world that you're not responsible for, but you didn't respond to it, or you responded in a way people don't like. And they may like it when you first do it. You saw H.W. Bush when they first in the Middle East, it was like 91% are in favor,
Hmm.
yes. But by the end, you know, you might be 91% against you. It may
Well,
have cost your election
yeah. Well,
because that's what you counted for.
I always point out that I didn't know too many people. And granted, I was young at the time, but I mean, I was old enough to at least see what was going on. After 9/11, when they were mobilizing into Afghanistan, I didn't see too many people against that. But then
Right.
20 years later, everybody was in favor of pulling out. And it's like, well, but we're still in Iraq, right? Like we're still, to this day, we're still there.
yeah. Yeah.
That was only 2, 3 years later.
Which is amazing, right? Because you talk about, it's easy to like second guess 5, 10 years down
For
the road
sure.
and say, I wouldn't have done that, or I was against it. But when you have votes in the Senate and Congress, and you know, Hillary Clinton
I was just
was
going to bring up
for.
Hillary Clinton.
Yeah. Now she had a few of those. I don't know if she's as big a flip flopper as others, but
Well, I don't know. She has what might be my favorite flip-flop moment because I saw her doing this and I was just like, "Wow. That's a whole new level of gaslighting there." When she was, I forget what day it was, but like on Monday, yeah, she was saying that she was going to kill the coal industry, and then on Tuesday she's in Pennsylvania talking to coal miners saying, "We're going to save your jobs." And it's like, it was the day before. It's like they forget that television is a thing, and
right. Yeah, they think
it's
they're campaigning in 1948 or
right.
something. It's like, nobody's going to see this.
It's
And
like,
when they do, it's going to be in some history book years
well, but
later.
I
Who
mean,
cares?
it's astonishing to watch because when she's challenged on it, she was like, "Oh no, if that's not what I was saying." It's like, no, oh,
It's
okay.
the tape doesn't lie.
I think maybe we have different ideas of how the English language works, but it seemed pretty
It-
clear that that's what you were saying.
oh yeah, I think that's the problem she had. It's why Donald Trump beat her. She wasn't genuine.
I mean, I made
You
the
know,
joke that it's like, wow, the Democrats found the one person people hated more than Donald Trump. I mean, that's
well,
that's incredible.
what's interesting about that, as bad as I think Joe Biden was as president, they stepped over him, and you
Yeah.
would think you had. I mean, Obama, whether you like him or not, 2 terms, so he was somewhat popular, and his vice president gets passed over.
Yep.
It doesn't make sense.
I have a theory about that, honestly. I really do
Yeah,
have a theory because you're right. It makes no sense. And in fact, At that time, I think Biden might have beaten Trump in 2016.
I think you're right.
The reason this is tinfoil hat territory, but buckle up because I think I'm right on this. I hope I'm not, but I think I am right. So
Okay.
after the incident in Benghazi, I think the Democrat leadership of the party came and said, look, we need a scapegoat because this makes the president look really bad if it's his fault, which it was his fault. I think they went to Hillary and said, hey, listen, take the fall. You've got the political wherewithal, you've got the name. Bill can help you weather the storm, and when it's all over, you're going to get the nomination for president. Because also recall what happened between her and Bernie Sanders in 2016.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
the emails have been released.
Right.
The Democratic Party was actively shadow banning, for lack of a better term, Bernie Sanders, who was clearly, I don't know that he was the favorite necessarily, but he was certainly popular, and there was a movement to really get him into that seat. And I'm just watching this. I'm like, I think an agreement was made to give Hillary the nomination.
I do think there was an agreement, and I think I'm not sure if it's the Benghazi thing. That's an interesting theory. I think because you just saddled her with something and she's going to run, although she did all right. I mean,
Yeah, well, I mean, and make no mistake, Hillary Clinton was not unpopular. I just don't know that she was necessarily clean enough to win that kind of race.
Right, and I think she became less popular the more she spoke. The more
100%.
people started to know about her.
Well, kind of
So-
like same thing with Kamala Harris. The more she talked, the less people liked her.
Right, like Harris still says, if she had more time, she could have won the election. It's like, no, you needed less time. You needed like one day.
Well,
You might have won.
I think the biggest thing, which to be fair, I don't think she would have won because I vehemently believe that Kamala Harris just is incapable of running a campaign. But I think what really did her in was the fact that they didn't have Biden step aside sooner, because even when he did, everybody knew it wasn't him. It was the party saying, okay, nope, you're out. You had one brain failing episode too many. The last one was on live television during a debate. I think he should have gone out much earlier and said, hey, listen, how old was he then? 82, 84? I don't remember. I think he should have.
82.
Yeah, I think he was 82. And it's like, listen, I'm 82 years old. I don't want to do this.
Well, and I think that, when you talk about the deal, I think the deal was, the Democrats had the first black, they were going to have the first woman, Hillary.
Yeah. Oh,
coming
probably.
off, and then Joe will work it out later down the road. And for him, he had been vice president. He had lost her in the primaries for president a couple times already. He wasn't considered a great candidate. And, I think once he got the 2020 run, he was like, okay, he said one term.
That's true. Yeah. And I pointed that out at the time. I was talking about it. I said, he said one term. Like,
Yeah.
You guys had it. I mean, you guys really had it,
But it becomes, almost like the king. Like
almost. Yeah.
I know I said that, but I'm in charge, so I'm not getting out of here.
Listen, things change. It's like, no, you could have pulled a poke. You could have said, hey, I'm going to one term it, and
You could.
I did the thing, and now it's done.
Right. And everybody would look at it like, okay, you kept your promise. That was probably the most important thing.
Mm-hmm.
Plus the fact it wasn't going well.
There's that too. There is that too.
Right. It's good for your party. I'm sure in his mind, though, let's face it, they worked over Bernie in 2016. They made some kind of deal in 2020 where everybody got on board with Biden when it got to South Carolina. And I think in the end, Biden adopted all the policies that Bernie wanted anyhow. So he was almost like a shadow president. It became
certainly to a point. I don't know that any of Bernie's more radical policies would ever just make, which I ultimately think that's why Bernie didn't win, is because he was too radical for a mainstream election.
True.
But
That's
I
true.
mean, we'll never know, right? Because he's not going to run for president again. Oh, well, I say that, and
Never say never. The
It's,
age is,
they might wheel him out, and because clearly we haven't learned our lesson.
right. Well, people, and we keep electing guys that are older each time.
Right.
So, I think he did say something. He would be 80, 86
I
maybe.
feel like, yeah, I feel like he did say something. Although one of my favorite Ronald Reagan moments was he's in the debate, and up to that point they'd been, raising concerns that, Reagan's kind of old, and it had come up, and he takes a moment and he says something to the effect of like, "I promise not to make age an issue of this campaign. I promise not to, for political purposes, point out my opponent's youth and inexperience."
Yes, that was like an awesome
It was so great.
statement. And even I think Mondale at the time was running
Mondale,
against him.
yeah.
He chuckled.
Oh, he
like,
was laughing, like, because it
It's
was funny. Like,
right. And now I think you wouldn't necessarily see that chuckle. The guy would probably
yeah.
go
I do.
crazy.
I will say I do miss the more, because like even Kerry pointing out that it was Obama's anniversary the night of their debate, and he was like, I'm sure you're thrilled to be here with me.
Yeah, I do think sometimes there's good statements. Lloyd Benson with Quayle, when Quayle compared himself to John F. Kennedy. Benson went on about how he knew Kennedy.
Yeah,
Kennedy's a
that's a
friend of
good one.
his. You're no John F. Kennedy. And it's like, oh, why? Which gets to the point of people who compare themselves to anyone. It gets a little tough. And, even in the book, when I'm comparing Trump, I've had a few people tell me, you can't compare, anybody, like, and they're anti-Trump, honestly.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, that doesn't mean every single thing they did is alike. There's just similarities, and that's it. You can't, I would say don't compare yourself to Jesus, that's kind of a given. And don't compare your enemies to Hitler. That's also a kind of a given. Those are,
and that's generally, hey,
they're
listen,
on the far points of,
unless they come out with a swastika.
yeah, I'd say, and start, telling you what they're going to do. Like, we think the Jews are the problem and we're going to exterminate them. Okay, we got a problem here.
Like, okay, now we're getting eerily close. Okay.
Yeah, now you can call the guy Hitler.
Yeah, now we're knocking on the door. We're getting there. Now all we need is a pencil mustache and a bad haircut, and you're right there.
Right. I need a pretty big hill. Same thing. If you want to be Jesus, you're going to have to heal somebody.
Right.
You're going to have. There's going to have to
then,
be a miracle, and I'm
even
going to.
then, yeah.
Right. It's probably going to be multiple miracles.
Yeah. God, this is fascinating. So, are there any other, what would you call them, like political witch hunts that people may not be aware of that historically obviously happened, but that are fascinating?
Yeah, I think most people are aware of them. Like, when they talk about McCarthyism, and that's a big one. It's kind of funny. I don't know if you've seen the story with Bill Murray being interviewed. I think it was on Bill Maher's podcast, and he was talking about the book that Woodward wrote about John Belushi and Saturday Night Live. And, Bill Murray said he got about 4 or 5 pages into it and stopped and threw it away. And he said, the things, he goes, and what I said was, oh my God, they framed Nixon, because he said everything they were writing in the book, he knew was false about Belushi. He said, I knew this guy. I was friends with him. I worked with him. He goes, imagine if they could do that to him, what did they do to Nixon?
Well, and I always said the only difference between Nixon and every other president was that Nixon got caught, but maybe he got framed. I don't know.
I don't, the Bill Murray theory, yes.
Yeah.
I don't, and who knows what's true about Belushi. The Nixon one now, when you look at things that have happened, you go, well, is that any worse than some of the things we've seen?
No.
With the use of FISA and, buying on Americans, and like, I don't know.
And like really, I'm not trying to sugarcoat it, but it's like the idea of a campaign spying on another campaign. I mean, is that really all that far-fetched? And is it
No.
really worse than, pun intended, trumping up charges to try to get somebody to be ineligible to run, and for that matter, trying to get people to play evenly politically, to try to get people to believe that someone's birth certificate is invalid. Like, are these really that different?
Right.
You
I
know?
mean, there's always been dirty tricks.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's just in that case, the cover up. It's always the cover up, right? It's, when you're caught, maybe it's better just to go, well, all right, these guys are caught. They're going to have to deal with it, and now that we use the pardon system the way we do,
Right.
just fine. We're going to pardon them anyhow.
I mean, one might say Ford began just a wonderful tradition that day.
Yeah, it becomes that. And I remember back then people being so upset. And you think about it, like Ford, honestly said, hey, I thought it would do such severe damage to the country if we were trying a president or former president. It doesn't help.
And he may have been right. I'm not going to say he was wrong.
Right. He may have been right. I genuinely think he believed that.
Yeah.
Others would say, well, there was a deal. What deal? He was going to become president either way.
Right, yeah, he didn't need that. Which, speaking of Ford, I always like to point this out. Wow. Well, I remember I brought this up when people were like, certain people online were getting mad about them making fun of Biden falling all the time. And I'm like, well, hey, I mean, Ford, to be fair, Ford slipped on one step and it became a gag for, I mean, depending on how many sitcoms you watch, I mean, it became a gag for, they reference it in That 70s Show, a show made 20 years over 20 years later, and they still make that gag. And then Chevy Chase just had a field day with it.
Yeah,
and it's like he fell one time.
Right. Yeah, they made him to be this complete klutz, and the funny part about it is he was an athlete, a football player. I mean, he might have been, well, he was one of the more athletic presidents. And,
yeah.
Unfortunately, you fall. I mean, Trump talks about that. Boy, if I slip, they're going to say something.
Yeah.
Yes, they will.
To be fair, Mr. Trump, I mean, you made a fair amount of statements in regards to someone else slipping. Now, granted,
Right.
they did slip fairly often, but I mean,
right. Yeah, you're going to, if you start throwing darts, you're probably going to have darts thrown at you. So be aware.
Well, but I guess the best kind of anecdote I've ever heard about Trump and how he wins politically is that Trump is a mud monster. So he's already mud. So if you throw mud at him, what are you going to do? Like he's already composed of it. Like,
yeah, I will say, he is. It doesn't matter. Nothing sticks to this guy, right? I mean, they used to say it about John Gotti.
yeah.
That nothing could stick to him. Of course, he was fixing his trials. That's why it didn't fix to him. That stuff.
Sure.
It doesn't stick when you fix the jury. But
Yeah.
with Trump, I just think his support is so locked in that people don't come off based on that. They might come off on wars or the economy or something.
Which I think the economy was the first, and then the wars second. Which I say wars broadly, but the military actions. But also, I think Trump benefited immensely because his political enemies were just so inept. Like, I mean, like I said this multiple times while it was going on. It's like, listen, if you want to indict Donald Trump, there are things you can do to do it. But what you guys are choosing to run with makes me think you actually don't want to win.
Yeah, it's kind of funny, because that's one of the things in the book we break down each case against Trump and why it was doomed from the start and what happened with these things. And, even when you get a conviction, it's like, nobody believes that this is a real case.
I said that about the New York case. I was like, I don't buy for it because, I mean, first of all, there's no victims. Second of all, the banks got their money back. So, and okay, the banks could have always done an appraisal.
Well, the bank, the Deutsche Bank vice president said, we don't follow what he gives us. We do our own analysis, and that had nothing to do. We didn't rely on it. Well, if you don't rely on it,
then it's a moot point. The biggest one I thought may stick was the Georgia case. That is until it turns out the prosecutor hired depending on who you ask, an ex or current boyfriend. And then I
Right.
was like, oh, come on. Like a great fiction writer could not come up with this.
Yeah, that was kind of a big break for Trump. And yeah, because they basically copied the federal case and made it a state charge.
Yep.
And they had a county where it probably was going to get a good hearing.
Yeah.
Even though I think the judge was a Republican, but he seemed willing to let things play out, which
That was the sense that I got. Yeah.
And so, but it is interesting that you went to so much trouble to get Trump legally, and in the end, it probably helped him. I mean, it put him.
I certainly think it's funny. I remember because I said there was another podcast we do that's more political, and I said this at the time when they released his mugshot. I said, "You guys just wrote his campaign for the next 3 months,"
Yeah,
and
and I
they
think you
did.
saw it. And I think you saw it especially in the black community with young men, but men of all sorts, who felt he might have been treated poorly and could relate to it. Felt that,
Hmm.
hey, I've been treated poorly too, and especially men of all sorts, but black men seem to have this idea. So, and I think just anybody watching it thought, wow, 4 cases is kind of overkill.
Yeah, this
You know,
seems and all but one seemed quite dubious, and even the one that seemed quasi legitimate. It's like, well, okay, but I'd want to see the evidence of this because you're making some pretty strong claims, and I haven't seen what you're going off of yet. And
yeah,
frankly, the testimony of one or two poll workers is not enough to convince me that you know anything. I need phone records. I need substantive data. But anyway, that trial ended up not going anywhere because once the conflict of interest arose, it was kind of like, well, this is kind of a done deal.
yeah, I think you're right.
Yep.
Hey, so let's talk about that amazing idea you've got. The one that's always in the back of your mind? Well, it absolutely deserves to be heard. Today, we're going to look at a network that's built to do just that, to amplify your voice and make that idea a reality.
Seriously, think about it for a second. What's that one thing you're passionate about? That one story that only you can tell? We all have that topic we could just talk about for hours on end, right? But there's a catch. That's the big question, isn't it? It's the hurdle that stops so many fantastic ideas cold. The how of it all can feel, well, super overwhelming and honestly a little intimidating. So what if you had a partner to help you get over that hurdle? Well, let's meet Arete Media. It's a podcast network, and its whole mission is to help creators like you launch and grow their shows. Think of them as your partner in crime, helping with the tough stuff so you can just focus on being creative. Now, anyone can say they'll help, right? But the real proof is in the community they've built. And you've got shows that dive into pop culture and revisit those childhood scares, like the Goosebumps crew, sitting right alongside shows that give you these sharp business insights, like Startup Cores with Salt, Arizona. And the list just keeps going. There are shows about self-improvement, deep dives into the magic of Broadway, even really academic explorations of classical music. It just goes to show you there's a space for every single kind of creator. It shows that no topic is too niche or, frankly, too bold. And this isn't just some static library of old shows. It's a living, breathing community. It's not just about making content, it's about celebrating it. For instance, they even host the annual Arete Awards to recognize the best shows on the network. And just to show you how active it is, here's the latest episode from the Average Intelligence podcast, which just dropped. Seeing this really drives home that the network is constantly platforming its creators and their brand new work. So after seeing all of this, the question is pretty simple. You've got the idea. You've seen that there's a community waiting. Are you ready to take that step and finally share your voice?
And here's how you do it. The whole path from idea to launch is laid out for you right there. It's not just about podcasts. It's about the stories and the knowledge and the passion inside all of us. So, what's yours?
So to kind of pivot from history a bit, like you said, you've had experience working in or around education. You've been a member of a school board. Do you find, generally speaking, at least in terms of what you've seen, do you think history as a subject is treated as or viewed as unimportant in our current education system?
Yeah, I think it is. I think, and when you go back to years ago, what was the emphasis? It was always arithmetic, reading, writing, arithmetic, they called it. And it's like, okay, yeah, those are important. But history, we go through that so quickly and we never really get to the end. So they kind of summarize things, for us, World War II, you got to. You didn't, with American history, you didn't get past that. Everything else you had to kind of look up on your own.
Funnily enough, I mean, we're still dealing with border disputes that were the result of the end of the Second World War, namely Israel. But, there are other areas in the world that we're dealing with that. I mean, the Czech Republic and Slovakia, for one.
Yeah. And most people have no idea what's going on because you just don't get deeply into it. And I don't know. There's so much history, you can make the argument it's impossible, but
it certainly is. But I've always viewed, and I kind of tell people this, that because a lot of people think history is boring, and it's like, well, when you think about it as memorizing like certain names and certain dates, yeah, it's really boring. But if you look at, okay, this event happened, what happened after that as a result of it, and what can you draw from? So like, World War I and World War II in an academic sense are treated as very separate events. But they're not. One is a direct result of the fallout of the other. It's like they're connected. I get out my, cork board and I'm like, you can actually make the case that it's one continuous war that had a break in the middle. Like if you really stretch it, you can make the argument.
Kind of an intermission?
Yeah, basically. Yeah, it's kind of a it's one war with a brief period of relative peace and an economic disaster in the middle.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that.
You got to be real loose with it, but I mean, you can.
Right, but one does, or the results of one can cause the next one. At least that much I think is true. How you settle the first one may lead to discontent and burn. The ashes then end up becoming a real fire in the area, and
100%.
Unfortunately,
yeah, they seem to understand that at the end of the Second World. Because I don't know, have you seen the newer movie Nuremberg that came out like late last year?
Yes,
I love the speech that Justice Jackson gives when they're in the old arena and he's trying to convince Dr. Kelly to basically spy on Goering for him, and he explains that there needs to be a trial so that we make sure this never happens again. Because it's super easy to just take them out back and shoot them, but now they're martyrs.
Yeah, right. Which is kind of the same thing. That's a war, but it's the same way with Donald Trump's election. You made him into sort of a martyr.
They absolutely
did the thing that people couldn't see happening. You made people feel sorry for Donald Trump. And
something you never thought would have been possible.
No. And it's those people in the middle. I think his supporters were always on board. They were there.
The people that were wearing the MAGA hats were always going to be there, but there were people who, like me, were in the middle, and it's kind of like, listen, I don't love the guy, but this seems one-sided.
Yeah, and that's what it became. And I think some people then, when given the choice between Kamala and Trump, and everything comes down to choices. I had someone tell me, they voted for Trump because it's a choice. I had two choices. I didn't have six, and he was the better choice. Okay. And I see that thinking. They were not a strong MAGA person. They weren't even moved really by the cases. It was just when it came down to it, do I pick A or B? Well, I really think B's not up to the job, so I'm picking A, even though I'm not 100% with them.
Well, and B was, option B was thrown in at effectively the last minute. There was one debate that was like pulling teeth to get. And then meanwhile, you got the other guy who at least, again, mud monster, but at least I can see the mud.
Mud monster.
To pull from a previous metaphor.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So, again, we mentioned your book, DC Swamp Strikes Back. So, what else can people expect when they pick up your book, which I highly recommend you do, and I will be doing so. You can purchase it on Amazon, or if there's anywhere else people can get it, because I know some people are anti-Amazon for some reason. But
Yeah, Barnes and Noble has it. There's anywhere books are sold,
Nice.
really. But that's, yeah, I think what you see and what I've told other people with the book is, like, sure, if you're a Trump supporter, you're definitely going to like it because you're looking at it and going, hey, I believe this stuff and I didn't remember it. Well, now you've got it all there in the book and you've got reasoning to back it up. You're also going to learn something, I think, about Aaron Burr. So even if you're not a Trump supporter, just an onlooker, you're a history buff, you can see like Aaron Burr may have gotten a bad rap, so to speak, because he's kind of pushed into the, trash can of history. And I was kind of guilty of that over the years, thinking, well, Aaron Burr, even though, and we kind of discard vice presidents anyhow.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
But to be vice president for Thomas Jefferson, it's early on in our days.
That's pretty solid.
Right there.
Yeah. Well, and I can say at least Hamilton at least gave Aaron Burr a bad rap.
Yeah, I think so. I think historians have too, though. It's like some of it, I think, is based on innuendo, and maybe they're just reporting what they see. But when you look at the paperwork, which I reference all that and all the documents, people can make up their own mind. I don't really judge whether he was guilty or not. It's I just think there was no evidence, and maybe that's the attorney part. I've always believed if you don't have evidence, we can't convict people, no matter who it is.
I'm inclined to agree because it's like, look, it's really easy to be accused of something, but you have to bring the evidence. Otherwise, it's just somebody saying something happened.
Right, and too often we have that happen, and it's one thing careers are ruined. That's bad enough that your career is ruined because someone said something. That's not enough. We need hard evidence, and if we're going to convict someone, especially of treason, punishable by death, I think we really want hard evidence, and the law requires that. So some of it, I don't spend a lot of time on that, but it lays out what the law is so people understand that. Hopefully in a way people can read and understand it without going to law school. It's just, here's what you have to prove.
Well, but that is important because, again, if you look at that, you can look at several cases where it's like they're guilty. It's like, well, yeah, but also what are the charges? Because, I point this out with Trump too. It's like the difference between the RICO law in Georgia was it had one other additional sort of element to it that might have made it stick more than the federal level, which is one of it took place in Georgia allegedly, but also, they had the RICO charge that would have made it stick. So, did they do something? Yes. Are they necessarily guilty? Like murder is a good example. Like, you have murder 1, 2, and 3, and a lot of people don't know those are different levels of criteria. And if you're charging with somebody with murder 1, for example, but they don't meet the standard of evidence, they can not be convicted.
Right. And you might get them for nothing because you had the wrong
exactly.
charge. That often happens where they go with the higher charge. And it's like, well, if you would have gone with the lower one, you would have
convicted. Yeah.
Yeah. And, depending on how you write the indictment and so forth can affect whether you're going to convict a guy. So but I do think, even people that don't, if you don't like Trump, you probably detest Trump. I don't know if there's any middle ground with him, but it's not a defense necessarily of Trump. It just shows you the parallels between him and Burr. And I think written as unbiased as anybody can write, because let's face it, we're all a little biased, and there's not much we could do about that. So you try, but it's backed up with any, documentation.
Yep, exactly. Well, and I will say this, I'm certainly not a huge Donald Trump fan, although it's complicated. I voted for him in 2024. It's complicated. But
that's what everybody says.
Yeah, I'm not a fan. However, going all the way back to 2016, I've said it and I still say it now. I don't think from a media perspective, Trump ever got a fair shot.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's some in the book too about the media. I think you'd find interesting the media back then and what Burr faced.
Yeah.
Different, but there was a media, his news pamphlets and so forth, and owned by people like Alexander Hamilton.
Yep.
So he started the New York Post, still around, which is kind of amazing.
Right.
But so Burr had his own problems dealing with the media. Trump is he's had a lot of trouble with the media, with the exception of conservative outlets. But even that,
I was gonna say even, yeah.
So
even they will their love knoweth bounds.
yeah. So I think it's interesting as a politician because Trump has kind of overcome a lot of that, where others have been dismissed. Mentioned Dan Quayle earlier, but he was kind of scrap heaped and never heard again after the media made him seem like a dunce. And
but I mean, it's funny. A friend of mine said the other night, we were doing another podcast, and he just said, he's like, yeah, but if Adolf Hitler were around today, he'd just have a podcast. But I mean, if Dan Quayle had the new media apparatus that we have today, you may have seen a very different Dan Quayle. But there were no options back then.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's the same thing when you see here, Trump and Burr. Trump in his cases went right to the cameras and told people. He didn't wait sure, they were reporting on it, but it didn't matter if it was NBC, CBS, whoever, CNN. He's standing there. Now, you can either broadcast me or not, but it's getting out.
Right.
And then he'd be doing the, on X and now Truth Social. So now he's really on both. And, and God knows where else, right? I don't know if TikTok videos, but whatever, this guy thought, okay, they're not going to report it the way I want. I'm going to report it for them. And, I'm sure his attorneys weren't happy when he'd leave court and go out and talk to reporters.
No, but I've said this in his defense back when everybody thought he was a joke. I said, listen, this is going to sound dumb, but hear me out. Trump understands professional wrestling very well.
Yes.
He knows how to play a character on television and get the audience to feel the way he wants them to feel. And he's a master at it. We brought up the Canada 51st state. That was to get a certain select group of the audience pissed off so that he could then do other things while they were distracted by that. He's a master at it.
Yeah, and I think even like Greenland, they end up with a deal that is better than what I don't want them as a state.
No, but you want to make sure. And like, I was trying to explain to you, why does Trump care so much about Greenland? It's like, because right now we have a military presence there, and right now we're the only ones. However, we don't have, it's not on paper, basically in the law, saying that we have exclusive rights to that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what Trump wants at the end of the day. And there's a few ways he can go about doing that, being a state's one of them, but that's the extreme measure. But
Right.
again, it's because people don't understand the overarching truth of the narrative. They just view it as a land grab. It's like, Trump's not going to invade Greenland. That would be way more trouble than it's worth.
I think the problem is the media has made him out to be like a madman.
Mm-hmm.
So they think, like Greenland probably did think he was going to invade us.
Well, but
Denmark.
that's one of the brilliant things about Trump, and I think he understands that, is because there's enough doubt there. Because it goes back to when he was, not negotiating with, but sort of dealing with, certain elements in the Middle East, or even Vladimir Putin in Russia. It's like there's enough belief that he might be insane that in the back of your mind you're like, he's not going to do it, but I mean, he might. He might do it.
I think enough people believe that they just, he's been around now he's been around forever because he was a personality. But, politically, certainly when he started running, even before that, we knew a lot about what he thought. He would pop up places that say what he thought, and then leave. It's like, okay, I don't know what you're doing. At that point, I didn't care. Like, who cares what Donald Trump in 2009 thought? Don't really care.
No, not particularly.
It's kind of like any celebrity when they speak. I don't.
Well, but in 2009, remember, in 2009, he was welcome on The View.
That's true. Right. Yeah, and that's
Not so
some of,
much now.
in the book when we talk about the media, we go through how he was treated and how he, then and now, and and it really is more, I think, on those shows, whether it's
Mhm.
late night TV or the news or the View. He was on Oprah. He was everywhere because he was the millionaire playboy at the time, and now he's the billionaire president supposedly. But I think it tells you that they really didn't like the fact he became a Republican and
Oh
became.
no, they didn't like that one bit. I do think, however, I think it's going to be fascinating in 30 to 40 years how history views President Donald Trump, and I think it's going to be very different than how we view him today.
Yeah, that'll be interesting.
It'll be
It's a
very interesting because stuff's obviously going to come out. Stuff's going to get declassified, and
yeah.
we're going to learn not the full picture because I don't think we'll ever truly know. Because truth be told, I don't think anybody actually really knows Donald Trump except for
Yeah.
Donald Trump. But
Well, it's a good point because when you sit there and you go, okay, like Iran, for instance, this whole military action or whatever it's being called, you sit there and think, what are we doing? But I still hold back on judgment because it's not over. Some people are declaring on social media, well, they were saying there was a deal when there was no deal. And here's the deal. And I'm like, who said that was the deal? Iran had said that was the deal. They're just mimicking propaganda from Iran. And you look at it and go, I kind of want to wait till the end. I mean, I have an idea of what a win is, but I don't know. I'm not sure what his full plan is. I don't think he's told. I know he hasn't told me.
Well,
he hasn't told the public. So
well, and there's an element to that that makes you think I don't even know if he knows what the plan is, but
maybe not.
maybe not.
I don't know. But
Um,
often it's kind of like when you said Greenland, Canada. There were things that were said and done, but that's not the end plan.
No.
The Greenland one, especially, you saw what the end plan was eventually.
this could all honestly be a game of 4D chess in which Trump is trying to cozy up relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia. Like we don't know.
Right.
We honestly don't know. Like
We don't know. We could all guess, and the people that don't like him guess that he's selling out, and he's under the commands of Bibi Netanyahu, and the people that do
which
like him, have a different version.
I will say this much about that whole thing is I think you can pretty definitively prove that it's the other way around because I know that as a collective in our country we have the attention span of a gnat. But if you recall when the previous go around with Iran and Qatar specifically, Benjamin Netanyahu issued a public apology to the nation of Qatar for attacking their military bases. Do you really think that was Benjamin Netanyahu's idea?
No, I
No.
don't. And I mean, and I think, to some extent, I'm sure Israel has brought forth ideas.
Sure,
in the
I'm
past.
100% sure.
But I would agree, and I think even Netanyahu said, anybody that knows Donald Trump knows that nobody controls him. I think that's
true.
pretty true.
I think that's true. Well, and again, Israel's in such a position geographically, politically, militarily. They are dependent on the United States. So I don't really buy the whole that Israel's pulling the strings from a back room. Like you said, do they have influence? Sure. But I mean, to an effect, every ally has influence to how much that. But I think Israel doesn't. Israel knows better as a nation than to play that game. Because if the United States pulls funding, then it's a much rougher existence. As rough as the existence is for the nation of Israel, it's a much rougher existence.
Yeah, I think at some point they don't survive if the United States isn't supporting Israel. And especially, we have this move here that's become very anti-Israel, mostly within the Democratic Party, but there's Republicans also.
Well, that's what I'm talking about, the political horseshoe theory. And I was like, I never thought I'd see a day when you had elements of the Republican Party becoming what I don't think you can sugarcoat it, anti-Israel, at least to a certain, maybe not full-blown anti-Semitic, although some
Yeah.
of them. There are elements there, but I never thought I'd
And
see
some
that
of
day.
it, some of it's the podcasting group. They're
For
not
sure.
technically, part of the Republican Party. I don't think you're part of the party unless you're holding office as a Republican.
That is a very good distinction. That is very good. I'm glad you said that because yeah, the majority of that group does seem to be on sort of the more fringe right online space, but that fringe is getting less fringe.
Right. And unfortunately for those that are part of the Republican Party, they're bunched in together
You have to
with
deal with that
the-
now. And I've
right.
said I've kind of, not that I'm an expert, but I've kind of said that I don't think the next presidential election I don't think is winnable for Republicans.
Really?
They've got to come up with some just crazy candidate that can appeal to mainstream voters, and there are so many of those, you know, problematic elements of the right, and then you have just the general anti-Donald Trump sentiment that's still lingering out there, even in the not the moderate, the independent voters. Like you're always going to have but the MAGA crowd's going to dissipate because Donald Trump's not there anymore.
Yeah.
So they need a successor who can carry the Trump banner, which I don't think there's anyone on planet Earth that can do that, but maybe you can find somebody sufficiently Trumpian that also won't alienate members of the far right, who there are several, at least in discourse, don't know how many actual numbers there are, but who are certainly willing to jump off the Trump bandwagon. And by virtue of that, the Republicans, unless the Republicans go further right than Trump. And then, like I said, you've got the more rank and file Republicans that kind of are not never Trumpers, but they're kind of like, I don't know that I like what the party's become. I think that's a trick that I don't think anybody can really pull off.
It's going to be interesting. I think it still comes down to choices.
Sure.
So, let's say it's J.D. Vance and Gavin Newsom. It's like, okay, well, people are going to have to make a choice. I'm starting to get hands like Gavin.
Man. I hate to say that, but I think in that race, I think Newsom wins.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
It'll be. I do think it comes down to those choices. I think the other problem, in these military actions, are making the, not so much with the so-called podcast group, the anti-Semitic type stuff that you see by Israel, but I think young people generally have other concerns besides they've lived through the terrorism, but they're not the same way.
Yeah.
I don't think it's ingrained in them. And those voters that were coming over, especially young males, and did come over for Trump, are they still there or will they be gone? Right now, I'd say they're leaving.
Well, if they can manage to improve the economy, which I don't think they can do realistically, not in that such short a time. I don't think you can get it back to a prosperous level. Although maybe, because Trump did some pretty incredible work in his first term, economically speaking. I think without the economy getting, just hardcore turned around, I don't think that coalition's going to stick around. That's just me.
It does come back to it's the economy, stupid. It's almost all the time. James Carville hasn't said much since then. That's very good, but that one was true. It always is. And, Bush, H.W. Bush, it was starting to turn around. The numbers were, but people didn't feel it.
Yep.
So when you talk about that short time, you have a very short time to get people to feel it in their pocketbook. And I think especially that group of younger people, can they buy homes? Are they making enough money? That's important. And they're not solidly Republican. They weren't solidly anything. So,
well, I'm just afraid that the Democrat Party, because it was weird. I don't remember who it was. I think it was some random YouTube channel, but they were talking about things, and they made it no mistake. They're like, we're right wing America for the America First movement, I guess you could call it, but they're calling for basically government social programs, and I'm like, wow. And you're on the political right, but again, it's that whole thing. It's like, well, we want this for me, not for everybody else. But it's like you're literally calling for socialist programs and you're on the right. Good luck threading that needle.
Yeah.
But you know, again, you get say what you will about Gavin Newsom. He's charismatic. He knows how to work the camera. And if he gets
Hmm.
up there and says, you know, like, well, for the last 20 years, it's been unfair for the average American, and we're going to make it fair by giving you free money.
Yeah. I mean, free money goes a long way.
It does.
It's unfortunate because principles are out the window. They'll flood the economy with money and not care about the effect as long as they are elected.
Because we
And
never learn.
right. And I think you'll see that on both parts.
You will.
So
You will.
I'm not surprised when you say there's some people that want, so-called socialist programs, and they're on the right. I mean, now some on the left, I've seen all kinds of ideas on what people should be given. And it's like, that doesn't work.
No.
It's never worked. And now to just double down on it, well, everybody can buy a house because we're going to give them $50,000. Well, wait a minute. Where
You
did that
can't
come
buy a
from?
house for $50,000, guys.
Well, right, but now we've got a down payment, or you have no down payment. But when people, we've tried that too, and
Yeah,
when we had the big
but then
crash.
the house goes from 450,000 to, you know, a million.
Right. Well, a lot of it's the supply, right? If you
Yeah.
have more homes, you'd have prices at least stagnate for existing homes,
Hmm.
and you'd have a chance of buying a home where you want.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, we haven't gotten to the point of building a lot of homes. So, when's the last time that was done? After World War II?
To that degree, yeah. Which I have a theory that period, because I'm sure you agree. If you don't, let me know. But history is cyclical. But just occasionally you have these periods that you might see times similar to that. I think that period, that post World War II boom in the United States, I don't think we'll ever really see a period like that sort of golden age again, because there were just too many perfect elements that were hitting at the exact same time for a country. Like we were the only major manufacturing force that hadn't been ravaged by that war.
Yeah,
And I
I
mean,
think that's true.
the ingredients were all there to have just that economic and baby boom
Yeah,
post-war. I don't know that we'll ever see, barring some worldwide cataclysm, which I really don't want to happen. And if the United States can somehow stay separated from it, I just don't see that happening again. But that's a myth that politicians on both sides of the aisle are chasing. And I think it's just unrealistic they're going to do it because it sounds good on a campaign trail, but
right. And the problem on the campaign trail, it's tough because the people running don't really know what it's like. We can say, well, I had it tough too when I got out of school. I had to struggle with student loans.
when I
It
left
doesn't matter to the
Harvard,
guy that has that, right? If you can't find a house, it's the same way when you talk about how the economy's doing. Like, I didn't feel anything, when James Carville made it's the economy stupid, I'm thinking things are fine.
yeah.
For me, it was, but if it wasn't, if I was out of work at that time, I might have felt differently. Or, even though I wasn't making what I wanted to make, I still felt, well, I'm doing fine. You
Yeah, I
know?
mean, everything's paid for, you know,
Right. Expectations are different, right? You're
yeah,
always sitting there. We could all use more money,
for
right?
sure.
We'd always like Elon Musk money if we could get it,
Of
or,
course, of course.
win the Powerball. But, you know, for most of us, it's like, well, I make X and I spend Y, I'm fine. I'm okay. And if that continues, you're fine. When that's inverted, now you want to blame someone. And who do we blame? Usually
That
the party in power.
guy.
Yeah. It's someone else. It's not us.
Yeah, it's never. Which I mean, to be fair, I've actually started to kind of come off that whole. I don't want to say that bootstrap belief, but like I'm big on personal responsibility. But I mean, using houses as an example, I mean, like if you live in an area, like I live in the north side of Indianapolis, and house prices are high here. They just are. and it's hard to gain entry into this market. The problem is a lot of the surrounding areas are not, they're cheaper, but they're not particularly good. Like they're not the
Yeah.
worst, but so you're going to have to sacrifice location or price.
Yeah. And a lot of us, and I don't know if it's still being done, but, we'd start, I started at a condo, moved to I was actually renting a house that was small, then was renting like an apartment, and then bought a house.
Yep.
Took a while.
Yeah, it does.
Took
It
longer
does
than I
take
wanted.
time. Yeah, my first apartment, I shared. God, I miss my rent. I shared it. I had a roommate. I know because I mean, you have roommates, and I paid $289 a month for a
There you
two-bedroom.
go.
That was my half, utilities included. Boy, I miss that.
If only you had stayed. Of course, the rent is probably a lot more now, but
I don't know that it's a lot more because funnily enough, my old roommate still lives there, and I'm guessing he still lives there because it's still relatively cheap. I'm sure it's under $1,000 a month. I'm sure. Which
you
anymore,
go.
that's pretty darn cheap for a 3-bedroom apartment. I don't care where you are.
yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, that is good. And part of it is, you've got to go in stages. A lot of people think they
A lot of
should
people
have
want to
the
jump. Yeah.
house, and it's like you can't have it. I mean,
No.
you may never have it, but I can tell you it's not going to be your first house unless, maybe you're in the Trump family or something.
Maybe. I don't know. I know some people whose parents gave them down payment for a first house, and it's like,
Yeah.
I mean, I get the whole wanting them to get ahead, but I don't know that that's the best way because then they go out thinking like, well, I did this. It's like, well, I don't know that you did it, but
Well, right. I guess you have to. That's up to the parents to decide. Is that,
exactly.
and you got to trust. I guess hopefully you've raised your kid the right way, or kids,
Yeah.
so that they don't have a head like that keeps getting bigger. Look at me.
One would hope, but I mean, to kind of bring it all back for a circle, I mean, I would argue that that's probably the biggest reason to learn history, even if you're not going into it professionally. It's just like if you know what has happened, you can at least have some kind of an idea of what will happen. Not exactly, or at least that's what
Right.
I firmly believe, but you can look to anything that's happening now and something similar has happened, whether it was 50 years ago, whether it was 5,000 years ago, something similar has happened somewhere.
Well, right, and maybe people that are looking for homes, you almost hope, hey, if we have another real estate crash,
There you go.
the housing will be cheap. But the problem with that is it's usually tied into your own job
Yeah.
or, it's not going to do you any good because you don't have the money still.
Well,
So
no, but I mean, you get creative. I do believe that I think multi-generational family living will be becoming more commonplace in the United States just out of economic necessity. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing because the vast majority of the rest of the world, that's been the standard for thousands of years.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, in this area, in the Chicagoland area, a lot of 2 flats, 3 flats were part of, and especially among certain ethnic groups. My mother-in-law, an Italian, who has passed since, but she would always say, "Why don't you just move upstairs?" To I'm like, because I'm not sure we want to live with you. But it was a nice offer.
For
And
sure, yeah.
it was a great idea. But I think people have gotten away with we all want to have our own home, and
Yep.
it's like, okay, but. And some of those are zoning issues. If they would
Yeah,
fix
that's
that,
true.
I do think it's not a bad way to live.
No.
You could have, especially with grandparents taking care of the grandkids. They're there. You've got a built-in babysitter.
Yeah. Well, it was because when my wife and we bought a house in December of last year, and when we were looking, I was trying to, because my mom and her husband aren't sick or anything, but they're getting older, and I said it's like it sounds morbid, but it's only a matter of time before something happens to somebody, and there are living conditions to consider. So I was trying to get them to like we can buy a bigger house together, and then it works out for you guys because it's less money up front for you, it's less money monthly for you, it's less money for both of us.
Yeah.
And you don't have to worry. Like if you need help, you don't have to call me. I don't have to drive an hour. I live there if you need
Right.
something. And by virtue is like when you guys do pass, we have a bigger house in our
Yeah.
in our name. Like it's a win-win for everybody. But they didn't want to do it, so they're baby boomers. What can I say?
Well, yeah, and people don't. Change is something, it's hard to get people out of their home.
It really well. They don't. That's the part that wasn't. So they lost their home to a house fire. So they're in a retirement living condo that they have to. Sorry, Mom, if you didn't want anybody to know this. They have to dip into savings to pay for every month, and I'm just like, you guys got to get out of there.
Yeah, yeah, that's a tough one, and
Yeah.
but sometimes those of us who have some age on us don't always make the best decision either. It's like I don't think so for whatever reason.
I let it go. I just said, hey, it's just an idea.
Right. Sometimes you think you have a great idea, and the other people think not such a great idea.
Yeah, this is a terrible idea, but yeah, maybe the offer was there, so I did my part as a son.
Yeah.
But what it goes down to is just, I guess, on this channel we're big on reading, we're big on books, we're big on history, we're big on philosophy, and they're all intertwined. We like read a lot, learn about history, and put your ideas out there because it might be crazy, but you might have the next great one.
Right.
And tons of people were thought of as crazy until they changed the world. So,
most of them, I think.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Probably, yeah, most of them. Like, could you imagine what they thought about, again, the founding fathers? Like, everybody in Europe was like, these guys are nuts.
Yes, you're taking on the world's greatest power, and you think you're going to win. I mean, that probably played for the revolutionaries because they looked at it like, we don't care. We'll either die or we'll win. And the Great Britain was looking at it like, yeah, this should be easy. It's almost like Trump says, we'll be done in 2 weeks. We'll be there, we'll be out. And then you find out, wait a minute, they're fighting differently.
Yep.
They're almost terrorist-like.
Yeah.
Like, this is a different kind of fight.
It's when George Washington says, they're where on Christmas Eve? Hold my beer.
Right. I mean, it's a different kind of battle, and they weren't used to it, so they kind of underestimate the opponent, which that's been going on historically too. We've probably underestimated terrorism, and the people behind it over the years.
Yeah, well, I mean, there is always the examination of motivation, which again is part of learning history. Is it's like, you can't fathom that the other side would be so fanatical because you don't understand their past.
Right.
You don't understand the movement. Once you do, you're like, oh,
right.
This is a little bit deeper than we thought, fellas.
Right. And that's the problem when you look at Iran. You go, okay, unless you change the regime, are you changing anything? It might be 10 years, might be 20 years, might be 2 years. They're coming back if you don't change it.
Yeah.
It's the way it is.
Yep. Well, everyone should definitely check out your book, DC Swamp Strikes Back. I'm excited to read it just for everything, but I really do want to learn more about Aaron Burr because I feel like I've sort of let him down historically because I just don't know that much about him, and I feel like I need to rectify that. But Dennis, where else can they find you online should they wish?
I'm on X. I'm on Truth Social, Facebook. I have a website that's under construction. We changed it, but it's going to be up again, DennisABrennan.com. On there, we'll have not only this book, other books as we write them, and a blog that we plan on doing pretty regularly, podcast appearances like this.
Awesome. And all those links will be in the description. If the website link doesn't work for you yet, just give us some time. It'll eventually work when they get finished constructing. And you mentioned there's another book that's being edited right now. Can you tell us what that one's about, or is that still a secret?
It's still a secret, but it's another comparative historical book.
Ooh. Can you I'm not going to ask you to tell me who it is, but is it a similar figure to Donald Trump, or is it somebody more on the left side of the aisle?
I would say it's someone to the right, but it's not really a politician.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I consider Trump's a politician now after all these years.
Right. Oh. Maybe it's Musk. No. I like the fact. So your plan is to basically do like a series of these comparative books?
Yes.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
that's gonna be fun. Can't wait to read it. But thank you so much for coming on today, Dennis. It's been a pleasure. I know you probably have other things to do, so I won't keep you on here any longer. But because I can go on history for forever. So, but if you ever want to come on again, you're always welcome. Let me know when the other book comes out, and we'll have fun then too.
I appreciate it. I really enjoyed this, and have a good rest of your day.
You too, Dennis. Have a good one. Thank you for coming on again.
Okay, thanks.